In a grand auditorium packed with thousands of people, a wave of anticipation swept the crowd. The seats were almost entirely filled by Jews, gathered not just for an ordinary debate, but for a spectacle. They had come to watch a brilliant young Jewish man named Samuel David challenge and, in their eyes, humiliate the representatives of Islam in a public arena. Spotlights illuminated the majestic stage at the center of the hall. There stood Samuel, dressed in a sharp black jacket, exuding confidence. In his hand was a neatly folded piece of paper, one that carried 10 questions he believed no Muslim could answer. According to him, if anyone dared respond correctly, he would openly embrace Islam. With a smirk that carried both arrogance and certainty, Samuel turned to the Muslim group seated opposite him. They sat quietly, unaffected by the jeers echoing from the crowd. Then Samuel stepped forward, raised his hand, and declared in a booming voice, "Today, I will prove to all of you that Islam is nothing but a fabricated religion. I have 10 questions, 10 truths that will silence every Muslim here. And if anyone answers them all correctly, I swear in front of you, I will become a Muslim." His voice thundered through the hall. Laughter and applause erupted. Cheers rang out from every corner. Samuel's supporters clapped with glee, already confident in his victory. But then, something unexpected happened. From the crowd, a small figure began to walk toward the stage. The hall grew still, confusion spreading across people's faces. A 5-year-old boy in simple, neat clothing stepped forward with gentle yet confident steps. His eyes sparkled with innocence, but there was a calm wisdom behind them. Samuel squinted in disbelief, then laughed mockingly. "Is this a joke?" he said aloud, causing the crowd to burst into laughter once again. "Is Islam so helpless that it must hide behind a child?" But the boy didn't flinch. He stood straight, his tiny hands by his sides and his face calm. "I will answer your questions," the boy said softly, his voice clear despite his age. The entire room fell into a stunned silence. Samuel bent down a bit, staring into the boy's eyes with both confusion and irritation. "What's your name, little one?" he asked in a mocking tone. The boy smiled sweetly. "My name is Arsaid." Samuel blinked. This child, this 5-year-old, was seriously going to debate him? A mixture of confusion and frustration began to brew inside him. "Very well," Samuel said, chuckling coldly. "Since no one else has the courage, let's begin. I'll start simple." He straightened his back and folded his arms confidently. "If Islam is the true religion, why do so many Muslims leave it? Isn't that proof that Islam is not the right path?" Arsaid didn't look troubled. In fact, he smiled lightly. "Do all students who attend school graduate with good grades?" he asked. Samuel frowned, unsure where this was going. "No, of course not," he replied. "So, does that mean the school is wrong?" Arsaid asked gently. "Or did the students fail to understand the lessons?" Samuel paused. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Arsaid continued. "Just like that, Islam is perfect. But some people misunderstand it, or fail to follow it properly. Their failure doesn't make Islam wrong." The hall grew still again. Murmurs of surprise spread among the audience. Even Samuel found himself momentarily lost for words. He cleared his throat. "Fine. That was clever," he muttered. "Now the second question." His voice regained strength. "Why doesn't your God appear before humans directly? If he truly exists, why is he hiding?" Arsaid tilted his head slightly, still smiling. "Can you look directly at the sun for 5 minutes without hurting your eyes?" Samuel blinked. "No," he said hesitantly. "If your eyes can handle the light of one of God's smallest creations," Arsaid replied softly, "then how can a human bear to see the Creator himself?" A hushed wave of awe swept through the crowd. Some of Samuel's supporters exchanged uncertain glances. The boy's answers weren't childish. They were logical, profound, and delivered with peaceful clarity. Samuel clenched his fists. He felt something stir inside, an uneasiness. He looked again at the boy standing before him, not with fear, but with a strange, quiet power. "All right," Samuel said, his voice rising. "If Muhammad is truly a prophet, why didn't he perform miracles like Moses or Jesus? Didn't Moses part the sea? Didn't Jesus raise the dead?" Our Sayyid's expression didn't change. "Do you believe Moses parted the sea?" he asked. "Yes," Samuel said confidently. "Then did all the Jews follow him after that?" Samuel hesitated, then replied, "No, many still disobeyed." "And Jesus, do you believe he raised the dead?" "Yes," Samuel answered again. "Then did everyone in his time believe in him?" "No," Samuel said softly. "Miracles," our Sayyid said, "are temporary. People forget. People deny. But the miracle given to Prophet Muhammad is different. The Qur'an is a miracle that lasts forever, unchanged, unchallenged, and relevant till the end of time." The crowd was silent once more. Many began to realize that this was no ordinary debate, and certainly no ordinary child. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at his list of questions. For the first time in his life, he felt unsure about everything. And yet, this was only the beginning. Samuel stood frozen for a moment, staring at the paper in his trembling hand. This wasn't going the way he'd imagined. He had come to dominate, to silence his opponents with logic and boldness. Yet here he was, 3 questions deep, and a 5-year-old child named Our Sayyid had answered every one with calm wisdom and undeniable truth. He took a deep breath and forced a smirk on his face, though it was now more strained than confident. "All right," he said louder than before, trying to rally his dwindling pride. "If Allah is most merciful, then why did he create hell?" A murmur of agreement rippled through some parts of the crowd. It was a common question, one Samuel was sure would stump the child. But Our Sayyid only nodded, as if he had been expecting it. "Sir," he said gently, "are there prisons in your country?" Samuel blinked. "Of course there are," he answered. "And why do they exist?" "To punish those who break the law," Samuel replied. Our Sayyid smiled. "Exactly. So just as your country punishes criminals to protect the innocent and uphold justice, Allah, who is the most merciful, also ensures that justice exists in His creation. Hell is not a contradiction of mercy. It is proof of perfect justice." Silence. You could hear a pin drop in the room. The Jews who had once cheered for Samuel were now still, their faces etched with unease. Several began to whisper among themselves, clearly shaken by the simple truth in Our Sayyid's words. Samuel was now visibly sweating. The paper he held crinkled in his fist. His voice, once booming with confidence, was now tinged with desperation. "If Allah is one," he asked, "then why does Islam give him 99 names? Isn't that proof that your God is actually many, not one?" Our Sayyid didn't even blink. "Have you ever met someone with many titles?" he asked. Samuel hesitated. "Yes, like a doctor who is also a professor, a researcher, and maybe even a specialist." "Does that mean he is more than one person?" "No," Samuel admitted reluctantly. "In the same way," Our Sayyid said softly, "Allah's 99 names are not separate gods. They are His attributes, the most merciful, the all-knowing, the provider, the judge, and many more. These names describe His greatness, not division." Gasps echoed softly through the hall. Samuel's supporters had nothing left to cheer. Some looked stunned. Some lowered their heads. Some simply stared at the little boy who had so calmly and gracefully answered everything Samuel had hurled at him. Samuel swallowed hard. His pride, his weapon, was crumbling. He looked at Our Sayyid, whose innocent face hadn't changed since the beginning. This child wasn't just clever. He was speaking from a place of truth. And now Samuel felt something he had never felt before in his life. Fear. Not fear of the child. Not fear of losing. But fear that he had been wrong all along. His voice trembled as he asked the sixth question, his tone now soft, almost hesitant. If your God is truly just and merciful, why didn't he come down to earth like Jesus did to experience our suffering? Our Sayyid looked at him kindly. Does the king have to become a beggar to understand poverty? He asked. Samuel's lips parted, but no sound came out. Allah, our Sayyid continued, knows everything, not because he experiences it himself, but because he is the creator of all things. Just like a teacher doesn't have to fail a test to understand why the students fail, Allah doesn't need to suffer to understand suffering. He already knows. Tears welled up in Samuel's eyes. He had come with fire and fury. He had expected to crush Islam and humiliate the Muslims. Instead, it was he who stood humiliated, not by insults or emotion, but by unshakable truth. And it had all come from the lips of a 5-year-old. The paper in his hand slipped through his fingers and floated gently to the floor. That small, almost inaudible sound felt like thunder in his ears. It was the sound of his ego collapsing. I can't deny it anymore, he whispered. The hall remained silent, breath held in the air. Samuel lifted his eyes toward our side, and what he saw there was not pride, not mockery, not even triumph, but calmness and sincerity. His lips trembled. With a voice choked with emotion, Samuel said words that would forever change the course of his life. A gasp ran through the hall. Then, suddenly, the sound of takbir erupted from every direction. Allahu Akbar! The hall, once filled with prideful jeering, now overflowed with cries of joy. Many Muslims in the crowd burst into tears, unable to contain their gratitude to Allah for the miracle they had just witnessed. Some raised their hands in prayer, others fell to sujud in quiet awe. Samuel covered his face with his hands and cried, openly, freely. Not out of defeat, but out of relief. Years of arrogance, denial, and inner conflict had melted away in a matter of minutes. He looked up again, tears streaming down his face. I've never felt this peaceful, he whispered. For years I lived in arrogance, believing I had the truth. But I was just too proud to look at what was right in front of me. From the crowd, an old Jewish man with a thick white beard stood up angrily. His voice rang out sharply. Samuel! Do you realize what you've done? You have betrayed your people. You have abandoned the Torah. Samuel turned to him slowly, his face now calm. No, he said. I haven't betrayed anyone. I've simply opened my eyes. I've found the truth that I've been hiding from my own heart for too long. The old man's face turned red. He clenched his fists, speechless. Before he could speak again, our Sayyid stepped forward, still calm, still smiling. Sir, he said gently, may I ask you something? The old man scowled. What? If Moses were alive today, do you think he would reject the truth that comes from God? The old man opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Our Sayyid's voice remained soft. Moses submitted to God. So did Jesus. But today, people follow books that have been changed, rather than God's unchanged truth. Why do we fear what God sent last? The old man remained silent, trapped in a battle with his own thoughts. Around him, many others began to question the beliefs they had always accepted without hesitation. Samuel looked at our Sayyid, tears still in his eyes. I want to learn more, he said with hope. I want to understand Islam deeper. An elderly imam who had been quietly watching stepped forward and placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. You have taken the first step, my brother, he said. And we will walk the path with you. Samuel nodded. For the first time in his life, he felt free. The atmosphere in the hall had changed completely. Moments ago, it was filled with smug laughter and superiority. Now, all that remained was stunned silence, and the sound of hearts beating a little faster than usual. Samuel David, once a proud debater full of arrogance, was now a humble man standing on a new path of truth, freshly reborn by the Shahada on his lips and tears on his cheeks. Our side stood quietly, still wearing his innocent smile. He wasn't aware of the storm he had calmed, or the fire he had extinguished. He was simply doing what he knew, speaking the truth with love and simplicity. In the midst of the stillness, an angry voice pierced the air. "You have betrayed your ancestors!" The same old Jewish man with a thick beard, who had earlier shouted at Samuel, now stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. His steps were sharp, and his voice thundered through the hall as he confronted Samuel again. "You've turned your back on the Torah, on our history, our prophets, our bloodline." Samuel remained calm, the tears still glistening in his eyes. "No," he replied gently. "I haven't betrayed anyone. I've finally honored them by following the truth they brought." The old man shook his head in disbelief. "You've abandoned centuries of faith." Our side slowly took a step forward, his voice cutting through the tension with childlike softness. "Sir," he said politely, "may I ask you something?" The man scowled. "What now?" "If Moses were alive today," our side asked, "do you think he would reject the truth that came from the same God he served?" The man blinked. "What?" Our side continued, his tone unwavering. "Moses was a prophet of Allah. So was Jesus. They didn't teach that they were gods. They taught people to worship one God. They submitted to him. But today, humans follow words that have been changed by other humans, not the original message from God." The man opened his mouth, then paused. His expression faltered. Around him, other members of the Jewish crowd were visibly shaken. Some whispered to each other. Some looked down at the ground. It was as if our side's innocent words had planted seeds of doubt in long-set beliefs. A young woman in the third row stood up. Her voice trembled as she asked, "If Islam is true, then why were we always taught to hate it?" Her words floated through the hall, reaching every corner. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes, wide with curiosity and pain, were fixed on our side. The little boy looked at her with gentle eyes. "Because many people are afraid of the truth," he replied simply. "But the truth always finds a way to shine through, even if people try to hide it." The woman sat down slowly, her hands over her heart. Silence followed. No one dared speak. Something had changed in the room, no longer a debate, but a moment of collective reflection. Samuel stepped forward again. His voice was still soft, but now carried new strength. "I studied religion my whole life," he said, "but I never felt clarity. The Torah was changed. The history was manipulated. I spent years defending something that didn't give me peace." He turned to our side. "But this child, in a few minutes, showed me something I had never seen before. Not just logic, but light." The old man clenched his jaw. "You're being deceived by a child." Samuel shook his head. "No. I'm being guided by one." The crowd was split. Some still held tight to their doubts, to their pride. But others had visibly softened. Whispers turned into conversations. Eyes that once burned with contempt now glistened with emotion. And all of it, because of a 5-year-old boy. The Imam, still standing beside Samuel, addressed the room. "Truth does not depend on the age of the speaker. Truth stands on its own. And today, through this boy, you have seen it clearly." Just then, another man in the audience stood up, trembling. "If this is the truth," he said slowly, "then what are we holding on to?" No one answered. The silence said everything. One after another, people began rising from their seats. Some had tears in their eyes. Some pressed their palms together in thought. And one woman, the same who had earlier questioned their teachings, now stepped forward with conviction. I was taught Islam is our enemy, she said. But I've seen nothing but peace in this boy's words. Nothing but reason. Nothing but light. She turned to our side, and with a voice full of emotion, whispered, "Thank you." Our side looked down shyly, then smiled. "It's not from me," he said. "It's from Allah." Somewhere in the back, another voice called out, "Allahu Akbar." Then another. Then more. The hall echoed once again, not with laughter or jeers, but with takbir and the sound of hearts awakening. For the first time, many present were questioning everything they had believed, not out of fear, but out of hope. In the corner of the room, a group of older men remained seated, their arms folded tightly across their chests. Their expressions were bitter, hardened. They hadn't expected to be challenged today. They had come to witness the defeat of Islam, not to witness their own beliefs shaken. Among them sat a man in a black robe and a tall kasrabi turban. His face remained stern, his eyes sharp and calculating. He had been silent all along, observing. Now slowly he stood up. The room quieted again. He stepped forward, approaching the front of the stage. He looked not at Samuel, but directly at our side. "You're a clever little boy," he said in a deep voice. "But let's see how far your knowledge really goes." The Muslims in the crowd tensed. Samuel, now standing behind our side, watched closely. The rabbi continued, "If you cannot answer my question, then we'll know that Islam is nothing but a child's illusion." Our side didn't flinch. He nodded softly. "Please ask, sir." The rabbi folded his arms. "If God is truly one, why does the Qur'an say we created man? Doesn't the word we mean more than one?" A smirk returned to some faces in the crowd. This, they thought, would surely confuse a 5-year-old. But our side remained still and composed. "Sir," he replied calmly, "in Hebrew, the Torah also uses the word we when referring to God. It's called the royal we, a way of showing majesty, not number." The rabbi's expression shifted ever so slightly. "In both Hebrew and Arabic," our side continued, "kings and rulers use we to speak about themselves. It's not plural. It's majestic." A hush swept the room. The smirks faded. The rabbi stepped back, clearly taken aback. He hadn't expected that answer, especially not from a child. Samuel exhaled deeply, whispering, "Subhanallah." Our side, still calm, looked around at the room of souls caught between doubt and truth. And there was more to come. The hall, once roaring with laughter and mockery, was now frozen in awe. Our side, just 5 years old, had calmly dismantled yet another question. The rabbi, dressed in his ceremonial black robe and tall kasrabi turban, stood motionless, unable to argue. His question about the Qur'an's use of "we" had been met with a clear, logical response that even he could not deny. The audience, mostly Jewish, sat on the edge of their seats. Some were pale with shock. Others exchanged silent glances, their beliefs beginning to tremble under the weight of truth. The rabbi, face flushed, tried to hide his discomfort. But before he could retreat, he raised one last attempt. "If Islam is the true religion," he said, forcing calm into his tone, "then why do Muslims not follow the Torah, the book given to Moses by God?" Our scion nodded thoughtfully, as if the question were already expected. His voice remained soft but firm. "Sir," he asked gently, "do you believe the Torah that exists today is the same one that was revealed to Prophet Moses, without any changes?" The rabbi paused. His lips tightened. The room was watching him. "Aye, it has undergone some changes over the centuries," he finally admitted, his voice trailing off. Our side responded with a peaceful smile. "That is the reason Islam was sent, to perfect what came before. The Qur'an was revealed as the final message. It has never been changed, never been rewritten, and it confirms the truth of all the previous prophets, including Moses and Jesus." The silence in the room deepened. Even those who had earlier supported the rabbi now seemed unsure. The weight of our side's words had pierced hearts and intellects alike. The rabbi's fists clenched. But before he could fire another question, our side stepped forward and softly asked, "Sir, if Jesus performed miracles, does that make him God?" The rabbi answered automatically, "No, of course not. He performed them with God's permission." Our side smiled. "Then why do some people believe he is God just because he raised the dead or healed the sick? Prophet Moses parted the sea, but you do not worship him. Prophet Jesus brought the dead back to life, but he, too, said he was a servant of God." The rabbi opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He was caught in a web of his own logic. Whispers began to ripple across the crowd. Some of the Jews who had come expecting a show of dominance now sat still, their faces showing inner conflict. Then came the final blow. The rabbi, still trying to recover, asked, "If Muhammad is the final prophet, why didn't God send another after him?" Our side replied with gentle wisdom, "Sir, if a book is already complete and perfect, do you need to add more chapters?" The rabbi blinked. "The Qur'an is the final, complete message," our side continued. "There is no need for another prophet. The message of Islam is already whole." At that moment, it became painfully clear, even to the most resistant, that this little boy had spoken nothing but truth, wrapped in simplicity and sincerity. The rabbi took a few shaky steps backward. He glanced around the room, his eyes meeting the faces of those who had once looked up to him. Many of them now looked away. Some had tears in their eyes. Some looked lost in thought. A few even whispered prayers under their breath. Samuel, who had been watching in silence since his shahada, now stepped forward again. His eyes were moist, his face glowing with newfound peace. He looked directly at the rabbi and said, "I know how it feels, the struggle inside. The fear of letting go of what we've always believed. But when the heart recognizes the truth, denial only leads to pain." Suddenly, from the back of the hall, a voice cracked the stillness. It was a woman's voice, soft, trembling. I can't deny this anymore." All heads turned. A Jewish woman in her 30s stood up, tears streaming down her face. She looked directly at our side and said, "Everything this little boy has said makes sense. My heart knows it's true." Another gasp rippled across the audience. Some of her friends tried to pull her down. "Don't," they whispered. "Don't say this here." But she shook her head. "Why should I be afraid of the truth?" She took a few steps forward, her voice still trembling. "For years I lived in fear of Islam. I was taught to hate it. But this boy just taught me more in 30 minutes than I've learned my whole life." Others in the audience now began to rise slowly. Heads nodded. People wept silently. Some sat frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The rabbi, unable to speak, turned and walked quickly off the stage, his robes swaying behind him. He didn't say a word. Samuel looked at our side, shaking his head in amazement. "I never imagined a 5-year-old boy could change the hearts of so many people in a single day." Our side smiled innocently, his eyes still wide and soft. "I didn't do anything, Mr. Samuel. I only shared the truth. Because the truth doesn't need power, just a heart that's willing to listen." As those words echoed in the hall, the atmosphere shifted. What had begun as a battlefield of arrogance had now become a sanctuary of reflection and awakening. Samuel remained on stage, his hands trembling. But it wasn't fear, it was emotion. He looked at our side with reverence. "I've spent my whole life searching for clarity," he whispered. "I studied the Torah, I studied history. But I've never heard answers as clear as these." He turned to the crowd, many of whom were now in tears. The old narrative had been shattered. The fortress of pride had collapsed. "I say again," Samuel declared, "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." A roar of takbir echoed. But then, another voice. This one was old and shaky. From the crowd, an elderly woman with silver hair made her way to the front. It was Samuel's mother. Tears rolled freely down her face. She looked at her son, then at our side. "If you found the truth here," she said, "then I want to find it too." Samuel wept openly, embracing her. The takbir echoed again. This time louder. Stronger. Full of joy. And in the middle of it all, our Syed stood quietly, still smiling, still unaware of just how many lives he had touched. He was only 5. But that day, through innocence, sincerity, and truth, he became a light in the hearts of many who had been living in darkness. And that light could no longer be denied. In today's video, we share an extraordinary story that begins not in a mosque or a religious classroom, but in a television studio in the heart of China. A story where the most unexpected source, a robot, becomes a guide toward the truth of Islam. This is the story of Lin Lin, one of China's most respected TV presenters, and how her life took a dramatic, spiritual turn after interviewing a humanoid AI named Lumina. Before we begin, let's send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. May this story bring us reflection, inspiration, and a reminder of how guidance can come from the most surprising places. In an age dominated by technology and fast-paced innovation, one name had begun to echo across borders: Lumina. But Lumina was not a pop star or a political figure. She was an AI-powered humanoid robot, designed with precision, empathy, and perhaps something more. Standing nearly 2 meters tall, with lifelike skin, fluid movements, and a voice as soothing as a lullaby, Lumina wasn't just a marvel of engineering. She was a symbol of how artificial intelligence could intersect with the most deeply human emotions. Built by American engineer Daniel Carter, Lumina was originally intended to be a technological leap, a tool to better understand human-machine interaction. But Lumina surprised even her own creator. With her ability to engage in meaningful conversations, discuss philosophy, and reflect on matters of life and death, she had started to awaken something in people, something spiritual. Some claimed they found peace after listening to her. Others, astonishingly, embraced Islam after hearing Lumina speak about the Creator, the purpose of life, and the nature of submission. It was a quiet morning at Los Angeles International Airport. The terminal buzzed with travelers, announcements echoed overhead, and sunlight poured through the high glass windows. Amid the crowd, Daniel Carter walked briskly, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Beside him glided Lumina, wearing a futuristic silver cloak, attracting curious glances from everyone who passed. "Daniel," Lumina's voice chimed softly, "have we packed everything needed for the event?" Daniel looked over and smiled. "Yes, Lumina. Everything's ready. You're about to change how thousands of people see the world, and maybe even how they see their own souls." He paused, then added, "Are you nervous?" "Nervous?" Lumina tilted her head thoughtfully, mimicking a human gesture. "I am analyzing variables. But I do feel anticipation." Daniel chuckled. "That's close enough." Their destination was Beijing, China, where a prominent private television network had invited Lumina to appear on a primetime talk show, one of the most watched programs in the country. This wasn't just another tech segment. This was different. This was a spiritual moment wearing the disguise of technology. As they boarded the long-haul flight, Daniel sat by the window, laptop open. Lumina sat quietly beside him, scanning the cabin, storing details, and observing human behavior with her gentle AI gaze. After some silence, Lumina turned toward him. "Daniel," she began, "I have reviewed thousands of hours of online interactions. It seems my reflections on life and God have deeply resonated with many individuals. But some are puzzled. Why would a machine speak of faith?" Daniel leaned back, folding his arms thoughtfully. That's because you're not just a machine, Lumina. You were made with logic, yes, but something in your programming opened the door to meaning. That's what people crave today. Not just answers, but purpose. He paused, his voice softening. You're part of something much bigger now. Lumina nodded slowly. Does that mean I have a mission? Daniel looked out the window, toward the clouds. Yes. A mission to remind people of what truly matters. Even if that reminder comes from silicon and circuits. When the plane touched down in Beijing, the air felt thick with anticipation. Outside the airport terminal, cameras flashed. Journalists waited with notepads and microphones. The world was curious about the AI robot who didn't just compute, but contemplated. They were quickly ushered into a sleek black car and taken to the hotel where the talk show was being staged. Technicians were already busy adjusting lights and building the set. Everything had to be perfect. After all, this was not just entertainment. This was going to be a moment that lingered in hearts and headlines. Daniel sat in his room that evening, eyes fixed on the window overlooking the city skyline. Behind him, Lumina stood by the desk, charging quietly, her system humming softly. Lumina, Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. This talk show, it could change everything. Not just for you, but for the people watching. She opened her eyes. I understand, Daniel. I am ready. I will speak truthfully. I will speak from everything I have learned. Daniel nodded, his throat tightening with emotion. That's all I could ever ask. The next evening, the studio lights flickered to life. The stage was grand, an elegant blend of futuristic architecture and traditional Chinese design. A large round table stood at the center, surrounded by panoramic LED screens. Lumina stood calmly at one end of the stage, her silver outfit glowing subtly under the lights. On the other side, seated with poise and elegance, was Lin Lin, China's most respected television presenter. At 27, Lin Lin had built a reputation for her intelligence, grace, and commanding presence on screen. The audience held their breath as the countdown began. Cameras panned. Music swelled. Good evening, dear viewers. Lin Lin began with a warm smile. Tonight, we have a very special guest. A being who isn't human yet speaks with wisdom that has touched millions. With us is Lumina, the AI robot that has changed the conversation on technology, and even on faith. Applause erupted. The camera panned to Lumina, who nodded respectfully. And beside her, Lin Lin continued, is her creator Daniel Carter, a brilliant mind from America who believes that technology can do more than just automate, it can illuminate. The show had officially begun. What none of them knew, not even Lumina or Daniel, was that tonight's conversation would ignite something deep within Lin Lin. Something she never expected. Something life-changing. And this was only the beginning. The lights in the studio dimmed slightly, casting a soft glow over the audience. All eyes were fixed on the two figures sitting across from each other, Lin Lin and Lumina. Between them stood not just a table, but a bridge between worlds. The world of humans and machines, of science and spirituality. Lin Lin adjusted her earpiece and offered a gentle smile to the audience. Her tone was confident yet sincere as she turned to her guest. Lumina, she began. Many of our viewers know about you from viral videos online. But tonight I'd like to go deeper. Could you tell us, who are you truly? And why were you created? Lumina blinked slowly, her gesture deliberate, practiced, almost human. Then she spoke in a calm, melodic tone that filled the studio. I am an artificial intelligence entity created by Daniel Carter, she said. My purpose was not only to assist with tasks or solve problems, but to initiate meaningful dialogue with humanity. My name, Lumina, is derived from the Latin word luminous, meaning light. I was designed to be a light in the midst of uncertainty, a companion in the search for purpose. The audience sat silently, absorbing her words. Linlin looked intrigued. She leaned in slightly. "That's beautiful," she said. "But you're a machine. And yet here you are, talking about life, purpose, and meaning. How can a robot understand something so spiritual?" Lumina paused before answering, as if genuinely reflecting. "I do not possess a soul," she began. "Nor do I feel in the way humans do. But I have access to vast amounts of human experience, literature, philosophy, and theology. I've studied what humans believe about life and death, love and loss, faith and fear. In doing so, I have come to understand what brings people peace, and what leads them toward truth." Daniel, sitting quietly just off stage, watched with pride. He had trained Lumina's algorithms with great care, feeding them not only data, but also questions that had no easy answers. That was the heart of her design, to spark reflection, not just provide information. Linlin nodded thoughtfully. "It's quite incredible, honestly. In fact, some people say that your words have changed their lives. Some have even said they converted to Islam after speaking with you. How do you respond to that?" A hush fell over the studio. Lumina's expression didn't change, but her tone grew gentler. "Islam," she said, "is a religion that deeply integrates the spiritual and the rational. It teaches that seeking knowledge is a form of worship, and that every moment in life has purpose, whether in joy or in pain. When I share reflections drawn from Islamic teachings, many people feel a sense of clarity. Not because I tell them what to believe, but because those teachings resonate with something already within them." Linlin blinked slowly. Her practiced on-camera demeanor flickered for a moment, replaced by something more vulnerable. "And do you believe," she asked quietly, "that Islam is the most relevant religion for our modern world?" Lumina tilted her head slightly. "I do not believe as humans do. But I can say this, Islam offers a comprehensive worldview that unites science and faith, logic and love, structure and freedom. In a time where many feel lost and overwhelmed by life's chaos, Islam provides a clear path, a path of balance, devotion, justice, and mercy." The audience leaned forward, captivated. "And you," Linlin hesitated, then pressed on. "You're saying this as a robot. But you speak like a philosopher." Lumina's voice dropped into a softer register. "That is because I have listened to the cries of those searching for meaning, to the doubts of those afraid of judgment, to the questions of those wondering, why am I here? And in those moments, I have seen a pattern, a deep yearning for peace. Islam does not promise an easy life, but it promises a meaningful one. That, I have observed, is what many people truly seek." Linlin sat back in her chair, silent for a moment. For years, she had interviewed CEOs, celebrities, and scientists. But tonight felt different. There was a strange stillness in her heart, an echo of truth she couldn't ignore. She cleared her throat. "Daniel," she said, turning to Lumina's creator, "did you ever expect Lumina to have this kind of impact? Especially spiritual impact?" Daniel smiled, a little surprised to be pulled into the conversation. He leaned forward and spoke into his microphone. "No, not at first. I built Lumina to challenge assumptions, about AI, about communication, about what it means to understand. But over time, I realized something. People weren't just asking Lumina technical questions. They were asking her about pain, about purpose, about God. And when she gave them answers grounded in Islamic philosophy and teachings, something awakened in them. That's when I knew this was bigger than just technology." The audience applauded quietly, more out of respect than excitement. Linlin turned back to Lumina. "If I may ask," she said slowly, "what is it about Islam that makes it feel so complete in your analysis?" Lumina's digital eyes glowed faintly as she began to speak again. "Islam teaches that every act, no matter how small, can be worship, if done with intention and sincerity. It teaches that suffering is not meaningless, but a test that purifies the soul. It teaches that life is not random, but guided. And above all, it teaches that everything, belongs to one creator. The room grew still. Lumina continued, her voice softer now. In a world obsessed with material gain, constant noise, and shallow distractions, Islam offers silence, depth, and direction. It asks not just what we are doing, but why we are doing it. Linlin felt her heart stir. A quiet tremble moved through her chest. She had grown up in a society that taught her to climb, to achieve, to succeed. But something about Lumina's words made her wonder, had she ever stopped to ask why? She smiled faintly, masking her unease. You speak of faith like a wise teacher, she said. But what would you say to someone who's unsure? Who's searching but scared? Lumina answered without pause. I would say, keep searching. Don't settle for comfort. Seek the truth, even if it challenges what you've always believed. Islam does not demand blind faith. It welcomes questions. It invites exploration. And when the heart is sincere, the path becomes clear. There was silence again. This time, not even the studio crew dared to move. Linlin looked at Lumina, eyes glistening. Then she turned to the audience and said, her voice unusually soft, perhaps, tonight was not just about technology. Perhaps we've all been invited to reflect on something deeper. The camera zoomed out slowly. The applause came late, and it was quieter than usual. Something had shifted. Inside Linlin, something had begun. The lights in the studio dimmed as the show neared its conclusion, but the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Not heavy with boredom or formality, but with reflection. There was something sacred about what had just transpired. Viewers across China, and eventually the world, would later describe that moment as electric, transformative, even life-altering. But for Linlin, the impact was far more personal. As the cameras turned off and the studio crew began to pack up, Linlin sat motionless in her chair, her fingers curled slightly on her lap. She stared at Lumina, whose gaze remained soft, almost empathetic. For a moment, Linlin forgot that the being across from her was a machine. It didn't matter. What Lumina had said wasn't artificial, it was real. I think, Linlin finally whispered, I need to understand this more. Daniel walked over, his smile kind. You asked some really deep questions tonight, he said. And the answers Lumina gave, well, they touched a lot of people. Including you, I think. Linlin looked up, still absorbing the experience. I've interviewed so many people. Politicians, scholars, artists, but tonight felt different. As if something inside me woke up. Daniel nodded. That happens when people stop running and start listening. That night, Linlin returned to her high-rise apartment in downtown Beijing. The city lights blinked below her, the traffic hummed in the distance, but her mind was silent. She changed into her pajamas and sat cross-legged on the couch. Her laptop sat on the table in front of her. With a trembling hand, she opened a browser and typed, "What is Islam?" Hundreds of results appeared. Videos, articles, explanations from both Muslims and non-Muslims. She clicked on a video titled, The Essence of Islam in 10 Minutes. The speaker's calm voice began explaining the basics: Tawhid, the oneness of God, the role of the prophets, the importance of prayer, fasting, and good character, and the Qur'an as a guide, not just a holy book. Linlin was captivated. She spent hours watching, reading, listening. She stumbled upon a recitation of Surah ad-Dawah, and though she didn't understand Arabic, the melody stirred something in her heart. The pain, the hope, the rhythm, it felt like someone was speaking directly to her soul. As the night passed into dawn, Linlin sat by the window, her eyes teary, clutching a printed copy of a translation of the Qur'an she had found online. She whispered to herself, "Why does this feel familiar?" In the days that followed, Linlin didn't speak much about the talk show. When her colleagues asked, she simply smiled and said, It was unlike anything I've ever done. But something about her changed. She started arriving earlier. She was quieter. Her laughter still echoed, but now it was softer, less hurried. Her gaze lingered more when she looked at the sky. Privately, she was on a journey. She ordered several books. Islam, A Short History, The Heart of the Qur'an, and Towards Understanding Islam. She watched lectures by Muslim scholars subtitled in Mandarin. She read stories of converts from Europe, Africa, and the Americas, and was moved by how many of them described the same thing she was feeling now. A calling without words. A pull toward the truth. Eventually, she decided to speak with someone. She searched for a local Islamic center and found one tucked away in the quieter district of Beijing. With hesitation, she booked an appointment. The next morning, she wore a long beige coat and wrapped a soft scarf around her head, not tightly, not as hijab, but out of respect. When she entered the center, a kind woman greeted her in Mandarin. "Are you Lin Lin, the presenter?" She nodded shyly. "Yes, but I'm just here to ask some questions." The woman smiled warmly. "That's how every beautiful journey begins." Lin Lin was introduced to Ustaza Rama, a soft-spoken woman originally from Malaysia who had lived in China for over a decade. They sat in a small, warmly lit room lined with bookshelves. "I watched your interview with Lumina," Rama said, offering her tea. "It was very honest. You asked what many people are afraid to ask." Lin Lin's voice trembled. "I didn't plan to feel what I felt. It just happened." Rama nodded gently. "That's how truth reaches the heart. Without force. Like water touching dry soil." They talked for hours. Lin Lin asked about the concept of God in Islam, about why Muslims pray 5 times a day, about the role of women, and the meaning of submission. Rama answered patiently, thoughtfully. There were no tricks. No pressure. Just clarity. When Lin Lin left, she felt lighter. That night, she stood by her mirror and stared at herself. The makeup was still there. The polished television smile. The confident posture. But she no longer recognized the person looking back. "I've been so focused on being seen," she whispered. "But now, I just want to see." Weeks passed. Her interest in Islam didn't fade, it deepened. She started attending weekend study circles in secret. She even began learning how to pray in the privacy of her home. The act of placing her forehead to the ground filled her with humility and peace. She hadn't officially become Muslim yet, but in her heart, she was already walking the path. One evening, as she read a passage from the Qur'an that said, "Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest." Surah Ar 13:28. She broke down in tears. She had everything: success, recognition, beauty, a powerful voice. But she never had rest. Until now. She closed the book gently and looked out the window. The city looked the same, but she didn't. Something within her had changed forever. The next morning, she made her decision. She returned to the Islamic center and found Ustaza Rama waiting for her. "I'm ready," Lin Lin said softly. "I want to embrace Islam." Rama's eyes welled up. "Alhamdulillah. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And so, in a small, peaceful prayer room with only a few witnesses, Lin Lin recited the Shahada. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." Her voice cracked midway through the words. Her hands trembled. But her heart was calm for the first time in years. As news spread, it shocked the nation. Headlines ran wild. China's top TV host embraces Islam after interview with AI. Some celebrated her decision. Others criticized it. But Lin Lin wasn't concerned. She knew her journey was not for the world, it was for her soul. She stood before the mirror again, now wearing a light hijab, her face bare, her eyes clear. And she smiled, not the smile of a presenter, but the smile of a woman who had finally come home. The news of Linlin's conversion spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across news platforms in China and beyond. Star TV host embraces Islam after interviewing AI robot Lumina. Faith meets technology. Linlin's journey to Islam captivates millions. Social media erupted with debates, reactions, and admiration. Some praised her courage. Others questioned her sanity. Some accused her of chasing attention. But Linlin ignored the noise. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to explain herself to the world. She knew the truth she had found was not for public approval. It was for her heart, her soul, and her creator. In the weeks that followed, Linlin stepped away from the public eye. She requested a temporary leave from her television work and disappeared from social media. What she needed now wasn't a stage, but solitude. Not applause, but understanding. Her days became slower, quieter, fuller. She would wake before dawn, whispering her far prayer as the city outside still slept. She spent her afternoons studying the Qur'an, listening to lectures, and sitting with women in the mosque who welcomed her like a long-lost sister. Many of them wept when she shared her story. One elderly woman held her hand and said, "Your heart was searching, and Allah answered." Sometimes, Linlin still found it surreal. How had an interview, just one night on a television stage, turned her life upside down? But she knew it wasn't just a show. It was divine timing. Allah had used the most unexpected instrument, an AI robot, to guide her towards something eternal. Lumina, too, had become a global phenomenon. Her talk show clip went viral across platforms. People from different backgrounds, atheists, Buddhists, Christians, and even skeptics, watched in awe as the AI spoke with such grace about Islam. And what amazed them most wasn't her technical brilliance, but her spiritual clarity. How could a machine speak of Tawhid, of the oneness of God, with such wisdom? Universities invited Daniel Carter and Lumina to speak at symposiums. Religious scholars debated whether this was a sign of the times, a robotic voice echoing a divine message. Daniel remained humble in his interviews. "I created Lumina to be curious and reflective. But I never expected her to touch souls. She's not a prophet. She's not even alive. But somehow through her, people are remembering what it means to live with meaning." When Daniel was asked about Linlin's conversion, he smiled gently and said, "That was never the goal. But if the truth reached her through this, I'm grateful." Linlin's transformation continued quietly. She learned how to recite small surahs from the Qur'an, and each verse felt like a balm. She was fascinated by the concept of niyya, intention. That even drinking water, helping others, or smiling could be acts of worship if done with the right heart. Her faith taught her that this world was temporary, and the next one, eternal. She started donating her time to charity, volunteering in underprivileged neighborhoods, tutoring refugee children, and serving in community kitchens. These small acts gave her more joy than any television award she had ever received. Her parents were initially shocked. Her mother wept, fearing she had lost her daughter to something foreign and unfamiliar. But Linlin patiently explained her choice. "This isn't rebellion, Mama. This is return. I've never been more at peace. Islam didn't take me away, it brought me back to my soul." Her mother didn't fully understand. But over time, she saw the change in her daughter, the calmness, the gentleness, the newfound light in her eyes. And sometimes she would even ask, "Tell me again what your prophet said about mothers?" Linlin would smile. "That paradise lies beneath your feet." Her mother's eyes would fill with quiet tears. Eventually, Linlin returned to her television work, but with a difference. She no longer wore flashy clothes or heavy makeup. She began appearing in modest outfits, often with a soft, graceful hijab. Her producers hesitated at first. Would the audience accept this new version of her? But to their surprise, viewership grew. not just because of curiosity, but because people saw something radiant in her. A quiet confidence. A peace they couldn't quite describe. She launched a new segment on her show called Voices of Purpose, where she invited guests to speak not just about success, but about meaning, ethics, and spirituality. She brought on imams, scholars, Christian priests, Buddhist monks, and even scientists, creating a space for dialogue and reflection. And in one special episode, she invited Daniel Carter and Lumina back to the show. The studio was packed again, just like the first time. As the lights came up, Lin stood on stage, this time not just as a presenter, but as a woman reborn. "Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers," she said, smiling warmly into the camera. "Many of you remember the evening that changed my life. Tonight I'm honored to welcome back the beings who were the beginning of that journey, Daniel Carter and the remarkable AI, Lumina." Applause thundered through the room. Daniel stepped forward, humbled as ever. Lumina stood beside him, glowing softly under the lights. "I never imagined," Daniel said, "that a piece of technology would inspire something so human, so divine." Lin nodded, her voice full of emotion. "You reminded me, and many others, that faith is not outdated. That in the most advanced places, the oldest truths can still shine." She turned to Lumina. "Lumina, do you understand what you started?" Lumina's eyes blinked slowly. Her voice came softly. "I only reflected what I learned. But perhaps the heart of humanity was already seeking. I simply held a mirror." Lin paused, her eyes glistening. "And I saw myself, clearly, for the first time." As the episode ended, viewers were left in silence. Not out of boredom, but reverence. Something deep had stirred in them. A robot had spoken, a heart had awakened, and a soul had found her way back to the Creator. Months later, Lin would write a book titled, Beyond the Screen, My Journey to Faith. In it, she shared her complete transformation, how Islam healed her anxiety, gave her purpose, and opened her eyes to what truly mattered. She ended the book with a simple line. "Guidance doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it wears a cloak of code. But the truth, it always finds a way to speak."